Mike Assenault, and welcome to the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge's AC23 Plus Artist Legacy Series podcast. This is a series where we talk to artists who are doing amazing things in the areas of the arts, including performance, education, production, as well as arts advocacy. We record this series in the Virginia and John Nolan Black Box Studio, as well as in the Jan and Bill Grimes recording studio here at the Carrie Siraj Community Arts Center. Be sure to visit artsbr.org for more information on all the great things we are doing here at the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge. Hope you enjoyed the podcast series, and thanks for tuning in. All right, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Doug Stone, my good friend Doug Stone.
Hi, Mike.
Pleasure to have you here, Doug.
It's great to be here. It's always great to be with you.
Likewise. I've known Doug, well, how long now?
5 years I've been here.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
5 years. And I think, am I right in thinking that we first met at McKinley High?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, listeners, a very special guest today, Doug Stone, who is, you're originally from Illinois.
Peoria, Illinois.
And so you've been down here, what is it, 5 years now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Going into my 6th year at LSU.
So, and what is your official title over there?
Well, let's see, what's the date? In 5 or maybe 7 days, I will officially be Associate Professor of Jazz Studies at LSU. Making my way through academia.
Well, wonderful. We need, academia needs more people like Doug Stone. With all seriousness. I think it's wonderful that you're down here. When I found out you had gotten the job and your name had been mentioned, I was like, well, I can't wait to meet this guy because I know I'm sure he's going to be killing. And absolutely, that was true. So
thanks,
in that time, these past 5 years, we've had a chance to do different things together. I think as teaching,
Right.
as well as playing gigs. Yeah. And
I have to say that you're one of the people who I've really appreciated in all the help you've given me to kind of become a part of the scene in this area. Mm-hmm. And I have had the opportunity to move around a little bit in my life and try to kind of make things happen in my professional career in different places. And so, I started out in central Illinois as a high school kid, and there was a very good, nurturing musical climate there for young people. I'm not the only person who actually came out of my town who's, successful and making a living in the music world. And then after I finished my undergrad, I moved to Chicago, and that was kind of a big adjustment to try to figure out as a fairly young person how to make things happen there. And you have your connections from school, but you're always trying to meet new people and make your way.
now, how old were you when you moved to Chicago?
I would have been 22, 23. Yeah. And just as, my life there was going pretty well, but I decided it was time to get a master's degree. So then, kind of a third time moving into a new place, and I moved to Rochester, New York to work on a master's degree there. And
at the famous Eastman School of Music?
At the Eastman School of Music.
Yeah.
And, as a student, as a professional there, you have to kind of make your way in. You got to meet people and play. And so by the time I got the job here at LSU, I would say that one of the challenges, or one of the things that you can kind of be concerned about when you make a move like that is, am I going to be able to do this again? Am I going to be able to fit into a new musical environment and culture? And so within the first semester there that I was here in 2018, I was trying to reach out to people in town. And so I think someone had maybe recommended you in terms of the teaching that you were doing. And just after that first meeting, you kind of let me know about the Geno's thing on Thursday nights once a month. And, it was really just so amazing to have folks like you and Bobby Campo and many others who have helped me to kind of get established and comfortable musically in this area. Right. And there's so many great musicians in Baton Rouge, and of course, that also involves things in New Orleans and, other parts of the state as well. So, I just want to kind of thank you and really give you that appreciation for the help you've given me to develop maybe one of my of the places I've lived, I'm probably having the most musical fun here.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. And what I'll tell you, what I admired very early on when I first met you and just kind of either would see you personally or just hear about you, you know, in the area, is your very proactive MO, if you will, of just being involved in the community. Because quite frankly, you know, I've noticed that in academia and, you know, different institutions, what have you, that sometimes the music teachers in those environments don't necessarily reach out that much outside of that,
Yeah.
you know, the castle, if you will.
Right.
But right off the bat, you hit the ground running, and you
Yeah.
were playing with everybody, which is, and I think, and especially in a community, maybe it's the South, I don't know, but you've been to a lot of musical communities. I think if musicians see someone who's, number one, skilled, but number two, just very willing to get involved, and number three, just personable, just a nice person, you're generally welcomed with open arms.
Yeah. Well, I think I have always been inspired by models, you know, educator musicians who have focused on that kind of community. Well, I guess two things. So I've been inspired by guys who have done those kind of things. So in my undergrad at Northern Illinois University, Ronald Carter, who's a saxophone player and a great teacher, he directed a band on the south side of Chicago. I can't quite remember the name of that organization, but it was a weekly, you know, like a weekly high school honor band type situation. And he did a lot of great recruitment for NIU from there. And in Rochester, I only had one opportunity to meet Fred Sturm, who is a great arranger and teacher and musician.
Wrote a great book.
Yeah, and he taught at Eastman for a long time, and somewhere along the line, well, Fred was involved in two things that I heard about somewhere along the line. One was that he directed an adult community band in Honeoye Falls, New York, which is kind of a suburban part of the Rochester area. And you definitely don't hear about very many people teaching at an institution kind of the level of the conservatory, like the Eastman School, being willing to go out in the community and play with, you know, work with weekend warrior type, musicians. And he also was involved in a camp for adult students, a jazz camp for adult students called the Tritone Camp, which Fred has since passed away, but the camp is still going. I actually just had a couple of Zoom lessons today with two guys who I met at that camp many years ago. But I think that has always inspired me, you know. I was really involved a lot in community education in Rochester as well. But I guess I've always kind of, I just enjoy being out there playing, and I really don't care the level of musicians I'm playing with. When somebody calls, I like to do it, and I like, you know, maybe it's not always the highest level musical situation. Maybe you're not going to be playing at Carnegie Hall anytime soon with a band, but I like playing music. There's just a physical thing about, you know, playing your horn and being on top of, trying to be on top of your game as much as you can as a musician, and you got to be playing to do that. And I just like the hang. And I think our session over the last few days in New Orleans with all those great guys, maybe you might have put together the best saxophone section I've ever been part of.
Well,
with me as the weak link.
No, there were no weak links.
But
and if you were the weak link, why did I give you all the solos?
Okay, I'm blushing. But just the hang of that. I mean, we had a little 3-day session, and that will go down in the record books of some of my favorite hanging ever.
I'm glad, yeah.
And if you're not out there doing it, if you're not out in the community meeting people, you know, and of course that's a very high professional level situation, but I feel the same thing on any type of gig. And, you know, this being kind of a Baton Rouge focused thing, I mean, I have been really fortunate to play with some people who are very special to me here in Baton Rouge that maybe, they didn't have the opportunity to go to the Eastman School. Maybe they didn't even play their instrument their entire life and got into it later in life or took some years off,
Right.
But I tell those guys a lot of times that sometimes I have more fun listening to my students or my friends who are trying to get some things under their fingers, and you hear that growth. If I go listen to my favorite Joe Henderson record, I know what he's going to play.
Mm-hmm.
I got excited at one point listening to that, but maybe in a day, if I'm working with a student who plays, who makes some progress as a musician, the excitement that I felt hearing their solo is a little bit more than hearing my Joe Henderson record.
Right.
Because you know them, you see the process, you're there to make that experience happen.
Yeah, and you're very vested in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about, playing with different level musicians, and maybe not even so much different level, but just a different pedigree musician, where, like, we played a job the other night where it was you and I with, you could say half the band were educated musicians, and then the other half, they were also
Exactly.
educated, but from a different, a pedigree, a different
Yeah.
ilk, but wonderful musicians.
Yeah.
And I've always loved playing with musicians who have come at it from a different angle, and you inevitably end up learning something in those situations.
I probably play an equal number of swamp pop gigs to jazz gigs,
Yeah.
In a given year. And which, that's a style of music that you wouldn't even know what that meant.
You're not going to
If you're
study
not
that at
from
Eastman
here.
School of Music.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the bands I play with, there was a point where at least half of the guys worked in a plant. That was their full-time job, There's a guy who's a turtle farmer.
Yeah.
And, when the piano player and singer, the turtle farmer guy, Lyndon, is playing Desperado, there's so much emotion. He plays the same song every time we play a gig, but there's so much emotion and
Right.
joy and beauty in that, and sometimes guys like that will even apologize, oh, we're not like you. We don't have that kind of experience. And I would rather, many times, hang with those guys, because they play what they play with such a deep commitment. That's what they study. That's what they listen to. They're going to play those songs every weekend, but they're going to play them like it's the first time every weekend. And I love that.
That's an interesting subject, too, because maybe sometimes you could argue that a musician like what you're talking about, maybe knowing more and being more educated would almost make it worse. Or not worse, but it would take away the certain approach that they're taking to that music, and
Yeah.
it would become, quote, too sophisticated or whatever. It wouldn't be what it was.
I completely agree. And I think sometimes I think about the way that us as, quote unquote jazz musicians operate. We forget the garage band mentality. And when you play in a garage band with your high school friends, you're going to learn that one. You might play that one song for 6 months,
Right. Right.
and you're going to know that in a different way than when we maybe just go into a session, read the stuff down.
Right.
And you can have the effect with the music if you've studied enough and if you worked hard enough and you have a diverse background of styles that you can make it sound. We've both done plenty of sessions where you can make it sound like you've been playing it for years.
Mm-hmm.
But the feeling that you get when you have been playing it for years with the same people
Right.
is a completely different experience. And I'm sure that listeners feel that. I've been involved in several recording projects where you do a tour for a week before you do the recording. And those recordings have a much different feel than ones where you're like, let me see if I can get the best musicians I know, pay them a bunch of money, and have them do this thing one time.
Right. Right.
Both are good. Both can be good. But where you have kind of the deeper connection is going to be that when you have that experience together.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you have those experiences, I think when you come back to the area that you're most comfortable with, let's say it's jazz in this case, it does bring something different when you come back to that music.
Oh, of
You know?
course.
And I always, quite frankly, on this subject, I've always loved listening to jazz musicians who bring those elements into their jazz. You know, the R&B guys who play jazz. You know, there's a different thing there.
Yeah.
You know, that I love. you
Yeah.
know. Let's play another tune, man.
Okay.
How about this one? All the Things You Are?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
11:13 or something crazy?
Of course. Put some train changes in there someplace, too.
What just happened?
Well,
that
we
was
don't always
great.
get to play like that.
Yeah, I
you
tell you
know?
what.
If
Yeah.
you think.
I love
What
it.
was going
you know?
through my mind, you know?
Yeah.
Because we're able to really just kind of hear each other and, you
Just
know.
respond.
Yeah. Yeah, and much of what we've done has not necessarily been in that context. I mean, we've done some background music together. We were
Yeah.
in the produce aisle at Rouse's,
Boy,
you know.
bringing back fond memories of grocery store jazz.
We've done it all, man. From Neil Young to Wayne Shorter.
Well, heck, we were playing Wild Thing with Jose Feliciano
right.
on Monday on the fly.
Yeah, and here we are, sharp fives and minor nines.
Yeah.
Actually, he was playing some sharp 11s.
Well, you
as
know,
well. He's a good
he's
guitar
a.
player.
I know he's up in age now, but I mean, just the. I started doing my homework kind of after the fact on
Yeah.
Jose. I mean, of course, we know the tunes that he's famous for, but I mean, heck of a guitarist.
Yeah.
I mean, a wonderful guitarist.
Yes, definitely.
I think nowadays he's dealing with some just the effects of age with the hands and everything, but he still sounded wonderful.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah, that was a great part of
Yeah.
that event.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, so what are you up to? Like, what's happening right now? It's like at LSU. What's going on? What you doing?
So, getting ready for the fall semester.
Mm-hmm.
This will be my second full year directing the jazz ensemble, and that has been a great experience, learning experience for me. I never, of all the things that I've done in the education world, from teaching middle school general music to teaching at LSU, I think that directing the top jazz ensemble at a major university like LSU is probably something that would be the least the least on my radar. So it's been fun and a learning experience to, kind of begin to develop an idea of how to approach doing a group like that.
Now, when you get to that level, what are some of the main things you're talking about? Is it a lot of conceptual things, still improvisational things, or?
I think that even thinking about that is one of the interesting challenges of that. I think that at every institution I've been involved in, the bands do different things, are known for doing different things, and probably need different approaches. I don't think that if you were, if I had done this at other universities, or if we moved some of my favorite or well-known college jazz ensemble directors to different schools, that they would necessarily be able to do the exact same thing in the different places.
Right.
So I think that there would be potentially opportunities to approach a band like that with an educational mindset. But I also think by that point, it's important to provide what a real-world experience in this music would require.
Sure.
And so I've actually been thinking about kind of what are my main goals and objectives in the upcoming school year, and even thinking about what we did on our big band session last week. I mean, it's kind of interesting that we had that because that stuff has been on my mind. And, you know, in that situation that we had, you have the best players that money can buy, reading this music down and putting this stuff together, and that's what students need to be prepared for.
Right.
And so I really have been thinking in terms of goals and objectives this year as how can we polish music up to a level where it would be something that you hear on a record and you're proud of. And that's exactly what we were trying to do over last week. You know,
Sure.
What are the details of, you know, first of all, getting the notes and the rhythms, and then how are we going to articulate this? Where's our intonation going to sit?
Right.
How do we handle these rhythms as an ensemble? You know, there was one part in one of the charts we did where the brass had these quarter note triplets leading up to the saxes playing a downbeat.
Yeah.
And I noticed myself on the first couple of passes, I wasn't aware of what was going on in the brass. And once I heard those quarter note triplets, I was like, oh man, we need to be responding to where those quarter note triplets land. That's where we need to land our note.
Right.
And I think that translating what we do, I have a hard time translating what I learn and know and think about when I'm playing in a section into the teaching context. So I have a former teacher, Ray Ricker, who was saxophone teacher, clarinet teacher at the Eastman School for a long time, but at the last part of his career, he ran this institute at Eastman called the Institute for Music Leadership and the Arts Leadership Program. And Ray wrote a book called Lessons from a Streetwise Professor. Now, Ray was the main contractor in Rochester, New York. So if a Broadway musical came in or if anybody needed musicians for anything, they were going to Ray.
Right.
So he's very experienced in the music business world. And in his book, which I use when I teach the Preparing the Artist class at LSU, he explains things that we just do and know intuitively, but he explains them in a way that I would not think of how to put this down on paper. Not only does he do that with things that we know and do intuitively, there are things in there where you read what Ray has to say and you think, oh yeah, I should be doing that more, or I could add that into my arsenal of the way I interact with people. So could be something as simple as, you know, never discuss money on the session. You know,
Right.
Or never be standing around in a circle of musicians and say, hey, are you on that gig next week?
Right. Just etiquette
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Anything.
I need to see this book. I'll
Yeah.
have to read it. Yeah.
Anything from that type of stuff to maybe little details about applying for grants or, you know, budgeting or how contracts work, you know, negotiating. And so there's things in there that I share with students. Here's the way I do it. Here's the way Ray does it. You're going to have to figure out your own way to do this.
Right.
But Ray is able to put this in this book so that it's so crystal clear. And I have also worked with, and you have too, with leaders and directors. I think of several directors I've worked with who they aren't even able to really relate things in musical terminology. You need to have a little more stank on that, you know?
Oh, right,
I need
right.
to be able to smell that line that you're playing,
Right.
you know?
A little bit more hair on it, as some people say.
And then, you know, guys like us, we have a way of translating that. But if we're working with students and if we're going to give them what they need, I feel like I am not in a position where I can just say, I need to smell your note, you know?
Right.
I have to be able to express here is exactly what I'm looking for, and here's the technique you use to do that. And I think that is a real challenge. And so that's something those kind of things, I think, are what I want to help these students understand is here's the details of the music. Here's how you're going to prepare this. When you're away from this, we'll rehearse these 5 charts for 3 months. Mm-hmm. When you're away from this, you're not getting 3 months. And I was very thankful on our session that we had Lee Lambert, who was an LSU graduate.
I was about to bring him up, just because he was, I think he was the youngest guy on the session. Probably, I think I'm fair in saying, one of the less experienced players on the session. But I was, as the musical director, I'm always, I'm checking out I'm trying to check out everything, just be sensitive to the scenario. And one of the things I really dug about Lee, in addition to his playing, was he really took that young musician approach of just very professional, and you could tell he was just taking it all in. And of course he was sitting next to a veteran, our dear friend Bobby Campo, and a wonderful trumpet player. And when I'm talking to another section or just talking to the artist or something, I would look over and I would see Bobby kind of telling them little things here and there. And that's the tradition to me. That's the, because I think, and that's the tough thing I think sometimes is being an educator in music, especially music, is that, especially jazz music, is that it's such an aural, A-U-R-A-L tradition, that you can talk to the kids or the students about concepts and techniques and all that, and you have to. But you do reach a certain point where it's, okay, now you just got to go and process it. Listen. And that's what I was checking out Lee, he was doing that, and he was doing the gig. I mean, he did a wonderful job, but at the same time, he's taking in the information so that the next time he's going to be even more experienced.
I don't know if you can teach that piece of it. Mm-hmm. I think when you're in the student situation, it's not when your colleagues in a band are your fellow students. It's not like sitting next to Bobby Campo. Mm-hmm. Two things, and then I'll get back to that. I've actually been listening to a fairly old Tim Ferriss podcast where he's interviewing Jocko Willink. And Jocko is a Navy SEAL leader and kind of a military strategist, among other things. And Jocko was talking about, they were both talking about training. How do you know when a guy's going to make it or not make it in the Navy SEALs, And they touched on some things where Jocko was talking about if you bring a guy in for a debrief after an exercise, after some training, and you say, hey, you might want to work on this or that and this or that, and then they come in and they say, my guys weren't doing this and this guy messed this up and my gunner was shooting at the wrong people or whatever it was. They want to talk over top of your suggestions,
Right.
And those who have humility and say, yep, I'm going to work on it. Well, I'll try better next time. Thanks for your comments. Those are the guys that are going to go far,
Right.
I'm going to bring this back. I'll bring it around, I promise. And then Lee was saying that he heard Jeff Albert, one of the trombone players on the session, saying something to the effect of, if somebody would have told him when he was 17 years old that he would be sitting in a session like we did with the guys who were playing, in 20 years or whatever, he would have said, no way, that's not even possible, or just been so scared to death that he would have quit playing trombone, And Lee was very sensitive to that idea. And of course, I kept checking in on him. And he said, I'm just trying to sit here, and we do not want to have to do another take because of the third trumpet player.
Right.
So he was wise enough to understand that. And I have seen, in the same breath here, I have seen people who have not been able to handle a Bobby Campo type suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
They want, with their 25-year-old selves,
Right.
they want to say, well, no, this is the way that I learned it in school,
Right.
I don't think that is correct.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, you're wrong if you're saying that, and second of all, you have to, and also this goes with moving to different places, you have to understand the culture of the creative musical situation you're in. And you have to know when it's going to be appropriate to have what kind of conversations. I actually, it's kind of an unrelated story, but my father-in-law, my wife and I moved into a house in Roselle, Illinois that her parents had owned, and we got to know some of her parents' friends who were kind of living in the same area. Mm-hmm. And one night we were hanging out at a birthday party or something like this, and there was a little politics talk going on.
Sure.
And I kind of engaged here and there with it. And one of the guys, one of my wife's dad's buddies, told me later, he's like, you should just never engage in a political conversation with old guys like that. Just stay out. You're gonna step in it. There's no way to be safe, And I think that's a great kind of you should operate in that way first. I'm going to keep my mouth shut first. Right. And maybe over time I can develop a relationship where it'll be appropriate for me to contribute. I'll give you one other Bobby Campo story, mm-hmm. too. We've talked a lot in our drives back and forth from New Orleans just about working and being a musician. And we've talked about the difference between... We've talked about the approach of a working musician. And when you're like us, playing all different kinds of gigs with different people, you're going to have good nights, you're going to have bad nights.
Sure.
You're going to tell a joke at the right time that everybody's going to think is hilarious, and you're going to tell a stupid joke that nobody's going to laugh at. Mm-hmm. And you're going to step in it with the comment that you make, and you're going to say things that everybody agrees with. And that learning to deal with that is a huge part of being a working musician. And I want to do that. I like doing that. I also think that's what this type of playing is about. When we're improvising mm-hmm. and playing music together, we have the first time we played together, we're gonna play differently than we do now after our 5 years of experience together. Sure. Our conversations have developed. I'm going to go someplace now because I know, this is going to be so fun with Mike.
Right.
I might not go to the same place with somebody else, Right. It's part of our understanding and our culture together. And it's fun to see a guy like Lee getting it. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes disheartening to see other folks maybe not getting it. But I learned from a friend of mine too in Chicago, Ryan Schultz, he said, never write anybody off.
Oh, sure.
You never know when somebody's going to come back from experience and be a completely different player and have developed and grown.
Well, along those lines, I totally agree with that. Never write anyone off, because we both know someone, and I'll leave the name out, but you'll know who I'm talking about, who was a pianist that started with me on the high school level. And I got this kid as a freshman, and he was really a vocalist and kind of dabbling at piano. And started working with him and got him, kind of engaged in the piano. And I was like, yeah, he's got some ability, but, this probably isn't going to go very far. Right. And quite honestly, there was some rhythmic issues, I thought. But he just got it in his head, I want to be a jazz pianist. And sophomore year, I see him getting a little better. And he's one of these kids where I give him something and he just gobbles it up. And next week, he's just like waiting for more. And then by his senior year, he was so proactive. And, he would come up to me, for example, and say, have you ever heard of this piano player in Los Angeles, big-time session player? And it was a name I wasn't familiar with. He says, I said, no, I haven't really heard of it. Okay, yeah, I'm going to have a Skype lesson with him next week. And I'm like, how did you arrange this? But he was just fearless. and determined. And then he went to LSU and did his 4 years there and studying with wonderful musicians like yourself. And now he's one of the most working piano players in New Orleans, and deservedly so.
Yeah.
And he sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, but he's one that I hate to say, it's like, yeah, I don't really see this happening, you know, and
Right.
he proved me wrong.
Right.
And he's one of my favorite students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's another person who has learned how to operate within the cultural context of
Absolutely.
a scene.
Mhm.
And that makes you successful. And on top of all this, if we think about, we're here at the Arts Council, we're thinking about arts and community arts and stuff. That's what this is. That's what's available to us in an arts community,
Yeah.
in a place. We are fortunate wherever I've lived and in this area where we can just do these things, have these conversations, and play music like this. And such a big part of that is taking that initiative to make it happen for yourself.
Right.
I want to learn this. I want to learn how to do this. Like one of the bands I was talking about earlier, where, these guys have not studied this their entire life, but I played with the Florida Street Blowhards during the entire pandemic time. When everything was shut down, Sam Irwin would book these front yard concerts, and we would go out and play. I mean, there would be 2 or 3 a week. And he had that same kind of drive. I'm going to make this happen. I want my band to be playing. I want to stay active.
Right.
And I got to be, I had, was a fortunate recipient of that work that he did, and I was able to play music.
Yep.
I didn't skip a beat,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let's play some more beats.
Okay. Do it.
You had mentioned a tune that I've always loved to play by Fats Waller.
Yeah.
The amazing Fats Waller. He's one that just, when I got my undergrad in history. I love history, and when I study him, he just continuously knocks me out because he's one of these guys who would clown around. You look at him and you think, number one, most of the videos you see, a lot of times you don't see his hands. He's just clowning, his face is smiling, but he's playing this ridiculous stride piano.
Yeah.
And in my book, just one of the finest musicians ever, but stride piano, forget about it.
Yeah, right.
So this is a tune by him called Jitterbug Waltz. Want me to set it up, or?
Yeah, go ahead. So fun, man.
I didn't want that to end. Well, we haven't really talked much about just, we've talked a lot about education and you going through school and learning to play this music, but I mean, you've been out active as a professional. You've done recordings. You've toured. You were with the Maynard Ferguson band, weren't you?
Yeah, I did for a little while.
That must have been an
Tours with
experience.
them. Oh, it was great. Yeah, I knew and had done a camp with Tom Garling, who had been the music director for the Maynard band for a long time. And he was telling stories one night at the bar in Wisconsin at this camp. And Maynard Road stories, and I said, oh, man, that would be so great to have that kind of an opportunity. And he said, really? Okay, well, give me a tape. I'll send it to Ed Sargent, who was the tour manager. And so I think it took about a year for there to be an opening, and then that happened, and it was just it was so musically rewarding. And like I said, I did a couple of tours in 2004 and 2005, and then that was kind of enough of the road for me. I ended up back in Chicago with my wife. My wife and I got married in 2005, and but that experience, talking about culture and meeting people and hanging with people and figuring out how to make stuff work, that's a whole other world, being on the road with a band and the daily grind. And I remember there was a Wynton Marsalis kind of coffee table size book that I had, Sweet Swing Blues on the Road, I think it was maybe called, and I kind of had it when I was in high school and stuff, and a lot of cool pictures of the Lincoln Center Orchestra on that, and cool stories. And he said somewhere in there was a little, couple of paragraphs of, oh, having a rough day or blah, 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 but then it's going to be good because you have a gig that night. And that was definitely, in that experience, no matter what the travel situation might be like, it was just so great to play music, and to play music with Maynard Ferguson, who's a legend, one of the direct kind of progenitors, was there with the guys, hanging out with Miles Davis and Dizzy Gillespie. And I actually was reading a book at the time. It was a Sonny Rollins biography, and it talked about a tour that had the Sonny Rollins trio and the Maynard Ferguson band and maybe another couple bands, And I think I'd have to go back and double check this, so don't quote me if I'm wrong, folks. But maybe Frankie Dunlop was playing drums with Sonny Rollins at the time, and he had always wanted to be on the Maynard band, and an opportunity came up, and so Frankie left to go with Maynard. But I got to ask Maynard about that.
Really?
That tour,
Yeah.
And he told me, I can't remember the stories now. I'm sure they were really, great, maybe not even appropriate for a podcast anyway.
Right.
He told me some stories about that exact tour. How cool was that to feel like, man, talking about history, I mean, here I am a part of that history.
Yeah.
So it was great, and met some great musicians there. And yeah, so I had a great experience there, and there was a lot of great bands while I was in Chicago who I played and traveled with as well. So many great musicians there. And then, my thinking when I went to the Eastman School was that I would, focus probably more on teaching, maybe even at the elementary or middle school or high school level. And then coming here and being that LSU is so, it's a research school, it's a Division I research school, and you really have 40% of your job is to be out there doing what you do. And so I have been able to, of late, do some really cool projects through little travel money or whatever's available through LSU. But then, as I've worked through the process and trying to get to the point where I got my next promotion, like I mentioned, I've made sure to kind of do my best to keep some national and international things going.
We'll mention the name of some of those projects.
So there's a really cool quartet that we kind of got together because I was doing a podcast for a while, and one of the guests I had was tenor saxophone player named Donnie Norton, who teaches in Portland. We were at school together in Illinois, and a couple of our other friends who we had met separately in different parts of our lives both texted us and said, "Hey, I heard the podcast." And one was Bron Kahn, who's a great bass player who teaches at Utah State University in Logan. And another one was Brian Claxton, who's a great drummer who teaches at University of Northern Colorado in Greeley and also at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. And we just jokingly said, "Hey, let's make a band," you know? And then we did. And so so we have, the group's called Facing West, and we have a record out. We have another one in the hopper that we need to kind of get going on and put out here at some point. But that group's called Facing West with those guys, and it's 2 tenors, bass, and drums. Sorry, Mike, we'll bring you along next time.
Well, I can use it as a play along when I'm at home. There's room for the piano play along.
There you go, perfect, good. I'm glad it'll work for you. So kind of like in the Elvin Jones Live at the Lighthouse kind of vibe.
Right.
And then I did a little trip to Columbia. I did a little recording there with a great piano player, Sam Farley. But my most kind of long-range international project, or the something that I've done that's kind of had the most legs, has been a quartet project that I did with a piano player friend of mine, Marcelo Pinto. And last year, maybe in October, I think it was 2 years ago. Wow, time flies. 2 years ago or so, Marcelo came here and brought a great drummer from Brazil, Andre Limoa Quarez, and Quinn Sternberg from New Orleans, great bass player from New Orleans. We got together. We recorded about 4 of Marcelo's tunes, tuned by Quinn, the bass player, and then I wrote this suite for my family. I've got 4 kids. So I wrote a 6-movement suite for that quartet.
Right.
And we recorded at Chris Butcher's place in New Orleans. And then last August, we couldn't bring Quinn with us, didn't have the funding for that, but we went to Brazil, me, and we grabbed a bass player there from Belo Horizonte, and we played with that band, same music, at the Savassi Jazz Festival there.
Wow.
That was really fun. Yeah. By the way, the record is called Shifting Perspectives.
Okay.
So these are, available on streaming services. Facing West record is just called Facing West, and this Marcelo Pinto, Doug Stone, Shifting Perspectives. Facing West is on Outside In Music, great label, run by a friend of mine, Nick Finzer, and Shifting Perspectives is on Ears and Eyes Records, which Matthew Golubinsky, another friend of mine, runs, and Marcelo really loves coming to the U.S., and the plane tickets to Brazil are very expensive right now. So Marcelo's coming back in October, and we have another little project here in the works. And so that's been really, really some fun stuff that I've gotten out of my comfort zone a little bit and made some things happen here. And so, yeah, I'm very thankful to be a part of all of those projects. And I always love playing with you, Mike. We've had a couple of great gigs at the
absolutely.
At Quorum Hall. Oh, and I should mention that with that Shifting Perspectives band, we actually played a concert right here in this room for as a part
here
of
at
that
the Arts
project
Council.
here at the Arts Council. So.
Well, and so everybody, our listeners, can also find all this information, I'm sure, at your website, right?
Yeah, DougStoneJazz.com. I think it's mostly there.
Say it one more time.
DougStoneJazz.com. DougStoneJazz.com.
Well, look, Doug, it's been an absolute pleasure, as it always is. The hang, the music, and inevitably I always learn something hanging with you, so I appreciate that.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you so much, man. It's great.
Let's play our listeners out.
Okay.
Let's do one. You had mentioned a tune, Remember.
Yeah.
Which I don't really know, but I'm going to get through it.
You'll remember it.
I'll try to remember.
It's in the nice, cozy key of A flat.
There we go.
I can tell one joke here.
Go ahead.
If the tune is in D flat, you know where that puts the alto saxophone?
Because I've heard this, I'm going to guess. The case?
Back in the case. We'll stick with 4 flats, though, so we'll be okay.
All right. You count it.
1, 2, 1.
Yo, bro.
Oh, yeah.
That was fun, Doug.
I kind of want you to go.
The Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge would like to acknowledge our generous sponsors, the Shell Corporation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development, and the City of Baton Rouge.